Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that I'm really passionate about, and that subject is leadership, and specifically the role that a leader plays in having difficult conversations. Now, the word leadership itself can bring to mind a variety of images. For example, that political leader, the person standing up there, pursuing passion, personal cause. It might be the explorer cutting a path through the jungle. It might be the person on the instant ground. It might be an executive developing her company's strategy to beat the competition. Leaders help themselves and others to do the right thing. There's a great quote, there's one of my favorite, always used to say that leaders are people who do the right thing. Managers are people who do things right. And that differentiation between managing and leading isn't just about the thing you do every now and again, it's the thing you're doing every single day. And so often it can just come down to that one simple decision about seizing the moment and challenging that difficult, awkward behavior and making sure you catch it in the moment. It's that now or never moment. Are you going to take action? Are you going to intervene? And when you do, how should we go about doing it? It's one of those areas that we are petrified of doing it sometimes. It's something we do wrong. So yes, while leaders are the ones that are setting the direction, they must also use their management and soft skills to guide their people in the right direction in a smooth and efficient way. That means their behaviors, their values, where they go about doing it, and when they don't, having those tools to correct it. Difficult conversations can be one of the most challenging parts of a manager's or leader's jobs, and avoiding these conversations can be extremely costly for organizations. They can result in absenteeism, in poor performance, in turnover and people leaving, and in the worst case scenarios, even litigation, which is the nasty, expensive stuff that everybody gets scared of. So in this short episode today, we're going to talk about facing the problem, preparing for those conversations, and some of the skills that we can leverage to best go about it. If you are stepping into a leadership role, if this is something you are doing as part of your day-to-day role, or if it's something you want to get a little bit better at, I hope this provides you with some quick thoughts, with some tips, with some go-tos. Maybe you listen to this again and again and again, and it gives you that structure to go about these conversations in a way that means you don't fear them, you can embrace them and help steer them to a successful resolution. Now, for many people, challenging or difficult conversations are a bit like a common cold. We all get them. They can be a real nuisance, but there seems to be no cure. Now, unlike the common cold, these conversations should not be avoided. The ability to be able to talk about very sensitive and emotive issues is an integral part of effective leadership and line management, and can be critical to managing people's performance, promoting attendance, and improving the team's dynamics on a watch, on a station, on any aspect of the emergency services, or even your team or organization. The good news is there are some very practical steps that I have seen used in different organizations. I've seen when I've been interacting with people, interviewing them, when I've asked them about the best ways they have these types of conversations, and some of these that I've used myself. And you can use these to help you handle those conversations better, and where possible, get the right outcome for you, your teammate, your employee, and overall the organization, service, or brigade that you're working for. So firstly, the key to mastering one-to-one interactions at work, particularly around things like performance, conduct, communication issues, the values, the beliefs, the type of behavior that person is exhibiting, is control. So firstly, we'll look at how you help yourself to stay in control of, firstly, the situation, putting in place those clear boundaries, your emotions, not letting people invade your emotions and be that tree in the wind that's blowing from left to right, by giving you the confidence to face whatever problem that comes your way, and also stating a clear action plan. Now, again, many leaders and line managers go into difficult conversations with very good intentions, but often make the mistake of prolonging or intensifying the problem rather than restricting or resolving it. Knowing when to expand a conversation by seeking clarification, gaining understanding, asking those open questions, and when to restrict it in terms of deciding what happens, moving into closed questions and bringing the conversation down to a more concise method, can often only be learned through experience. So this is stuff you're going to have to get out there, get in the weeds, and become that sort of challenging conversation plumber, where you've got to get in there, you've got to get into the trenches, you're going to have to learn it. So first of all, let's look at facing the problem. Are you the right person? Let's imagine that you arrive on Monday morning and that you learn that one of your team has been posting derogatory comments about you or a colleague on social media, and someone comes up to you and speaks to you about it. Maybe someone else is suffering a significant dip in their performance. They are not doing what they should be doing. They are not holding up their end of the bargain. They're not supporting the team. They're not being held accountable. Maybe someone else is returning from 2 weeks sickness absence due to stress, and you've got that conversation coming up. Or maybe someone has just failed to get an expected promotion and you are going to have to let them know about it. So firstly, what is a difficult conversation? Now, this is a conversation where you have to manage emotions and information in a sensitive way. Again, in some of these examples, you might address poor performance or conduct, you might deal with personal problems, investigating complaints, dealing with grievances, comfort or reassure somebody. For example, if they have been made redundant, maybe you've got to tackle personality clashes in different watches, or maybe on your own watch. You've got to deal with potentially delicate situations such as turning down requests for annual leave, which is a difficult one for everybody. And leave is obviously something that's really tough to give people what they want, as we haven't got the staff currently in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. And these conversations usually take place one-to-one. So the first thing you might ask yourself is this my problem? Most problems, in all honesty, to do with performance, conduct, absence, or personal issues are the responsibility of the line manager, but this is not always the case. And there will be times when a more senior manager, or in a larger organization, someone like human resources specialists, can actually talk to that employee first. Now, we have the benefit of these in a lot of UK Fire and Rescue Service, and they're there to support you. They're there to support you as a leader, as a manager. So make sure you touch base with them or refer them where relevant. That doesn't mean avoiding the conversation. Now, if you accept that you are the person that needs to talk to this employee, talk to this person, talk to this member of your team, this is still an understandable temptation to delay a potentially awkward encounter for as long as possible. There's a great book called Eat the Frog, and it speaks about, if you've got a frog to eat and at some point today you're going to have to eat it, just get in there and eat it first. Today's episode was once again brought to you by William Wood Watches. With the tagline, once forgotten, now reborn, every single watch has 100 years of firefighting history in it. They take an original Merryweather brass firefighter's helmet worn by firefighters in Britain in the 1920s and melt it inside every single William Wood watch. All of the craftsmanship is carried out in the heart of London, and they are proud to lock in the legacy of the brave firefighting heroes in every single timepiece. I think one of my favorite things about these watches is the fire hose straps. Now, these have gone from landfill to effectively luxury now. They receive fire hose from a massive amount of fire services from all around the world, which has come to the end of its life. The majority of the fire hose around the world is unfortunately ends in landfill usually. They clean the hose, repurpose it, and sew it into the luxury watch straps themselves. I always wear the red one, but when you get your watch, it comes with a series of different ones you can get. You can explore the full range of upcycled straps on their website, and you can see the link in the episode notes. If you head over to their website, you'll be able to check out the Jubilee, the Triumph, the Valiant, the Bronze, and the Chivalrous. All of those watches are available right there, and you can spread the cost of these over 3 to 6 months interest free. So for the pulse of the fire service right there on your wrist, head over to williamwoodwatches.com and take a look. Most of us instinctively know when it's the right moment to deal with the problem. Issues can crop up without warning, but more often than not, there are early warning signs. Now, you can help make these conversations with the employee less difficult by having a quiet word, the first sign that there's something wrong. For example, you may notice that an employee becomes more moody or withdrawn or is acting out of character. Those small social cues that tells you something is not quite right. So keeping in touch with your staff and the team, if they see you're approachable and ready to listen, then you're more likely to come to you at an early stage when you might be able to act decisively to help them. And it's far better to nip problems in the bud where possible, rather than waiting for them to become entrenched or complicated. I always say kill the monster when it's small. So firstly, let's acknowledge that these conversations, for most people, feel difficult. But why? Talking face-to-face with an employee about issues or problems that you both feel very strongly about will take most people, managers, leaders out of their comfort zone. You may be worried that a meeting will turn into a confrontation or that it won't go the way you think it was going to go. What's going to be the result of this? Who's going to have to get involved? Am I going to get told off? I'm going to lose my job? Are they going to put in a complaint about me or a grievance? This sense of anxiety is a very natural response to a challenging situation and may be caused by feeling that you are not in complete control of it. Firstly, maybe you think you're not in control of the facts. What actually happened? When did it happen? Why did it happen? It will not be enough to breeze into a meeting confident that you kind of get the gist of it and you know what's been going on. Maybe you feel like you're not in control of your emotions. You're expected to be in charge. That's your job, isn't it? You've got to be in charge. You've got to be in control. So what happens if emotions run high and you become embroiled in this heated exchange of views and idealisms? And maybe you definitely would want to acknowledge the fact that you are not in control of your employees' emotions. That is the unknown in the room at times. You may have prepared as much as you can for the interview and even have a rough plan of what you're going to say, but you cannot always predict how the employee will respond. For example, they may throw accusations straight back at you or just break down in tears. You don't know which way it's going to go. And finally, as Laura alluded to there, you don't know the level of support you're going to get. You have this idea of feeling protected, of feeling supported by the organization that you work for. But if you haven't informed your line manager and or if HR what the plan is and what you're going to do, you don't know what line they're going to take. You don't know what line you're going to take. You may end up feeling isolated or undermined if they change your decision or if they don't support you. That is a massive thing to consider, certainly for line managers that have other line managers working beneath them. How are you creating that sphere of support and that sphere of safety where you can make people feel like they are going to be supported, they're going to be looked after when they're making those difficult decisions? Therefore, many managers feel that the nature of the encounter forces them to act out of character, perhaps appearing more strict and businesslike than normal, a bit more than they would do in day-to-day interactions. They take on this strange formal approach, and they think they need to be a certain way. If they get found out in some way that people know they don't know what they're doing, all of these things make it really challenging. So there's some things you can do to help you mitigate some of these feelings, some of these stresses, some of these anxieties. And the first one we're going to look at is just simply prepare. It's the old saying, if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So prepare for the conversation that you're going to have. You're going to need to establish the facts, reflect on what you know about the individual, get support from the people that you may need support from in the future, check your policies, check your procedures, make sure you're in line with it, and plan the meeting. So firstly, let's talk about planning the meeting. Decide on location. You've got to be able to have an open, frank, one-to-one conversation in private. Now, a lot of emergency services have offices that are set up for this. Face-to-face is the most effective. Telephone or email is not ideally great for having these types of conversations, as the employee can see the matter is being taken very seriously. So try and make it a face-to-face. Secondly, the room layout. Sit opposite someone with a table in front of you shows that it's a bit formal, whereas if you sit next to someone, it can be less threatening. That might sound like a really subtle thing, but like when you see people go speed dating or something like that, it feels very it could almost be confrontational because there is an expectation. I'm going to say something, you're going to say something, and we are literally sitting in opposing positions. Whereas if I sit next to somebody, if I sit at 90 degrees to somebody, we can have a discussion. There's no pressure for you to always give me eye contact. You're free to look around the room. You're free to consider your thoughts and opinions. And we're sharing information because we're sat beside each other. That may seem like a very subtle one, but I think it's a really important one. So always bear that in mind. Make sure you've got a sufficient time. Do not rush this conversation. Allow time for a break to gather your thoughts or to obtain more information if you need it or if they need it. Give yourself some breathing space after the meeting, as you or they or both could be emotionally drained. Today's episode is supported by our good friends over at Duty Crew Coffee. Now, as you're probably aware, coffee is the most popular drink worldwide, with over 2.25 billion cups of coffee consumed every single day, and over 70 million of those in the UK alone. Most of this is consumed in our crew rooms, our watch offices, and by our emergency services frontline staff. So when you're getting together around the mess table, don't be drinking no nasty ass cheap coffee. Nobody likes that guy that brings the cheap stuff. Life is too short to be drinking crap coffee. So if you head on over to dutycrew.co.uk or click the link in the podcast below, you'll be able to jump on over and see the Duty Crew coffee products. They come in 227 gram oversized high quality recyclable standard pouches, and they are individually wrapped 10 gram coffee bags. They're quick, mess free, convenient. They have a one-way degassing valve, which is an absolute must for storage of freshly roasted coffee. You can get the 20-pack response bag. They've got the HQ, they've got the No Duff, they've got the Unity, the Decaf, and of course all of their products are Rainforest Alliance certified, Fair Trade Foundation, and most importantly, they taste freaking epic. I started drinking Duty Crew about 2 months ago, and then when I fell in love with it, I got in contact with them and they came on board with the podcast. So jump on over to Duty Crew Coffee if you want some of the good stuff. Now back to the podcast. Next, we're going to look at what do you know. Now, if you're dealing with performance or conduct issue, for example, you need to have the relevant facts at your fingertips. What were the employees' performance targets? And in what way have they failed to meet these targets? Are they in extenuating circumstances? For example, if they've been on sickness or absence or a training course, do you need to adjust those targets? You've got to know what it is you're looking for and be able to demonstrate that. If there's an attendance issue, then make sure you have an accurate record of that employee's timekeeping. If you've made a note of them coming in late on several occasions but didn't say anything to them, why not? That was your opportunity to challenge. That was your opportunity to just raise an interest into, is something occurring? Is something else going on in your private life? Now, ideally, if you've been giving clearer feedback, this should not be a surprise. None of these conversations should really be a surprise to people. Now, of course, there are expectations. If you need to talk to an employee about a sensitive personal matter, such as personal hygiene or something like that, then they may be shocked. So you should consider the impact that that specific issue is having on the team and be able to back up any statements you have with evidence and not sort of hearsay. Everyone says this, all the people say that. You need to be able to be specific. It may also be worth thinking about what you know about the individual. Having a close working relationship can sometimes make it harder to broach sensitive subjects, as personal feelings can get in the way. However, having good rapport, is a really good employee does not mean that you will probably have some insight into their psychological makeup. This will help you anticipate how they react, most definitely, but a pre-prepared script can help you keep on track and in control of the meeting ultimately. It's a bit like planning a few moves ahead in a game of chess. At least have those strategic landmarks of things you want to discuss as you move through this conversation and try and stick to it. As we referred to earlier, you want to check those policies and procedures. Now, your internal policies and procedures for handling disciplines, grievances, absences, there is a framework in place which will help you through the intended actions that you need to be looking at, really. Now, where are the policies kept, and have you read them recently? They do change, they do get updated. Make sure you are up to date with the most recent one. You don't want to get caught out on that case. If you're a business that has a trigger point, for example, a discussion about sickness, absence will need to be had when you hit a certain level, make sure that it happens. Make sure that you don't let those things pass by. Similarly, you might need to check the official policy for handling flexible working, dress codes or social media at work, depending on the nature of the matter that you're going to discuss. Now, having done that, if you're absolutely satisfied that there is a breach of company policy and you have to have all the evidence with you, then you need to decide how seriously to take this conversation. And that's where getting management support, speaking to your line manager, speaking to other managers on the station, on the watch, on the section, can really help. You may just want to remind the employee of the company policy and warn them about future conduct, or you may already have a quiet word with them and want to take this a little bit firmer and a little bit further. Think about what you would like the outcome of the meeting to be. Is it an improvement in performance or a change in behavior? They are different. Next, we're going to look into is your skills as a person, and remembering what skills you have. Many of the skills needed to manage difficult conversations and behavior are often referred to in a rather, let's say, sort of derogatory tone as sort of soft skills. And you've heard me speak about this on the podcast before, that the soft skills are in fact the hard skills. And what I mean by that is so many people don't develop these. Because there's nothing soft about dealing with an emotional or confrontational employee who may appear to be trying to unsettle or undermine you in a conversation. So most managers will be familiar with the theory that underpins good communication. For example, the importance of active listening and questioning techniques. But many of these skills can only really be learned through experience. You can practice these day to day with your family, with your friends, with your kids. Things like paraphrasing, things like open questions, listening in a way that makes the other person wanting to speak. Testing yourself in like role playing can be useful. So do it, use those skills. So to manage these conversations, you need to think clearly about the way you communicate and also your levels of self-belief. So when we look at those questioning skills, the ability to use an appropriate type of question and get a useful response is a hallmark of an effective questioner. Development of these skills require time and practice, so put the time in. Be conscious and be present when you are having conversations with people. It's worth being familiar with a couple of little things that we're going to speak about here, which are open questions. They're the things that start with who, why, where, how, what, when. When did you leave? To what extent would you say that? How do you feel about this certain thing? Open questions normally start with those aspects: who, where, what, why, when, how. These encourage the other person to talk freely, as little or no restriction is placed on their ability to answer. It doesn't frame it into a yes, no question, which we're going to get onto. These enable the person to open up, and pretty much on any topic, their opinions, their feelings, they can put anything they want into that aspect of the conversation. The drawbacks on this is that the person can talk too much, they can drift away from the subject in mind, and it can be difficult for you to control those parts of the conversation. So to avoid this, try using a qualifier. For example, very briefly, tell me about X, or in a few words, tell me about Y. And then secondly, as we've already referred to, there is those closed questions. So did you speak first? Were you at fault? Do you think this is correct? Those sorts of closed questions, they can be effective in verifying specific information. So you may want to follow up with a closed question after an open question, or even maybe refocusing on the subject in hand or emphasizing a vital point. The drawback, of course, is that they can be very unhelpful when dealing with somebody's feelings. They need to have a little bit more space to try and articulate what they're struggling with. For example, did that make you feel bad? That's a closed question. It's a yes/no question. And it doesn't really elicit the depth of response that you're hoping for. So instead of saying, did that make you feel bad? You'd ask, how did it make you feel? Or what did it make you feel? Or what did you think was going to happen as a result of that? They are open questions. And then what I would always call sort of paraphrasing or probing reflective questions. Why did you say that? Or what in particular made you feel like that? Or can I clarify that you've just said this? So what I'm hearing is X. These are useful in seeking depth and detail, so asking somebody to further unfold part of what they're talking about. The downside of these is when you are reiterating something, whether you're probing in specifically on something, the person can feel threatened at times. So you've got to give some attention to the fact of anticipating and monitoring the effect it has on the person. Know your audience. See how they are taking those questioning, and if you probing and reflecting even more is going to be worth pushing further for the piece of information you need to know. A really bad thing that if you're not going into a conversation with a truly open mind is when people use leading questions. So if you were to say to somebody, so you're not suggesting that X, so you must admit that you knew that was wrong, or are you saying that it's acceptable too? So these are questions that you've just got to avoid. You have the run a risk of putting words into somebody's mouth and leading them towards your own conclusions. Don't go in there with too much of a fixed mindset. If you have got some of the facts, haven't got all of the facts, you do have to sincerely want to have that open, non-judgmental conversation. Be open to their experiences, be open to their perspective. And another thing that especially comes about when people feel a bit anxious or nervous is they can fear the silence and quickly trip into multiple questions. So I do this sometimes on the podcast if I'm not fully embedded into a conversation. Sometimes when I'm coming into something at the beginning and people hit those multiple questions in sort of triplicate where they'll go, can you tell me what happened, how you felt about it, and what you did about it? Okay, don't do that. Slow down, break the question up and be specific. The person's unsure about what part of the question to answer first, and it can just confuse the whole situation. So as we've sort of gone through there, start with open questions. So when you are beginning the conversations, use those open questions, allow them to, flex out the issue, allow them to explore the space that you're trying to discuss. And then you might want to follow up with probing questions. When information needs verifying, you can use closed questions where necessary. Now that's all to do with the stuff that you're saying, but the most effective part of learning and the most effective part of understanding what's happening in the situation is if you are listening. And there's a big difference between listening and just waiting for your turn to speak. So active listening is a really crucial thing that can involve, when we listen to others, we interpret the message that they're giving to us in the combination of the words they're using, their tone of voice, their facial expressions, their body language, and the way in which we want to interpret and perhaps mirror that if we want to build further rapport with the person. So skilled communicators use non-verbal behavior to back up and enhance what they're saying. Because on average, we spend our working day communicating in the following ways. Writing is about 9%, reading is about 16%, speaking is 30%, but listening is the biggest aspect that we should all be leveraging because that's a whole 45% of our day. So active listening is a vital part of oral communication. It strengthens your relationship with anybody that you interact with, especially your team or employees, by demonstrating that you think they have something worthwhile to say. You are invested and interested in what they are saying. So active listening involves picking up on those small, subtle signals that are being given to us, not just the words. Facial expressions can be the hardest to control and often betray your real emotions. So when you're looking at being an effective listener, there's a few key things you really need to think about, which is, using supportive and encouraging gestures, nodding of the head, smiling into their responses. It's that non-verbal encouragement for them to continue as though you get what they're saying. They are making sense. What they are broadcasting is being heard. The old one of making eye contact. This is still a solid favorite. Look at the speaker directly, but don't stare. Sometimes taking notes can help. Jot down key words that they use so you can come back on them, you can paraphrase on them in later questions. Think about body language. So look interested by actually facing the person, altering your facial expression and staying relaxed and calm in the situation. And when you do feel those moments of silence coming in, ask clarifying questions, but try to avoid interrupting them. So now coming back to that fear of losing control of the conversation, there's a few key things that I want to talk about in terms of staying in control. Now, the key to managing difficult conversations is effectively control. You need to control the meeting and how it progresses. This means you decide if and when you need to adjourn for a break and what tactics are working and if you need to change your approach. For example, you may have started out being quite expansive and friendly, but you realize that a firmer style is needed and you need to bring the meeting to a conclusion and agree a way forward. So although it can be tempting to enter a meeting wanting to be liked and to maintain a close relationship and friendship with the person or the employee, most conversations will work best if you adopt a professional manner. Set out from the beginning how the meeting will run, the issue that you wish to discuss, and how you hope to move forward. It can be difficult to control your emotions if the person you're talking to becomes confrontational or makes an accusation about you personally. They may seek to get in behind your defenses by appealing to you personally and hoping that you will identify with their point of view or their concerns. Remember to focus on the behavior and not the person. You've got to remain objective and non-judgmental at all times. Being in control is not about finding winners or losers. Be prepared to negotiate, particularly if the employee is acknowledging the problem. You've got to be ready to reach a compromise or is working to agree on a way forward that works with what you need and what the organization needs. And finally, as we kind of spoke about earlier, is how much do you actually believe in yourself? Can you honestly say that you have the skills you need to deal with a difficult conversation? Can you say that you would hold your nerve and focus on the issues even if you were provoked? How defensive are you going to get? Will you not worry at home about the encounter? Driving home, thinking about it over and over and over again. Do you think you could actually be fair to the person? So to close, we're going to try and box it off with a little part of the episode that you can maybe listen to again and again. And these are sort of some steps that will give you a useful framework for dealing with the challenging conversations. Now, although all conversations about performance, conduct, personal issues, they're potentially challenging, there's steps that I'm going to try and carve out below, and I've pulled these from a whole bunch of resources. It can be geared towards a sort of a more formal meeting. So if you have a more formal chat with an employee and you just want to sound them out about how they feel, you may wish to use some of the basic structure we're going to go through here, but adopt a more conversational and relaxed approach. This is just a template which you can flex for your own style. So firstly, with all of these introduction, you've got to set the tone for it. Begin the conversation by explaining the purpose of the meeting. Set out the structure of the meeting, agree the standards of behavior required during that meeting, adopt a calm and professional manner, and reassure them about confidentiality, both prior to and after the meeting. Secondly is those checks. So don't be afraid to be referring to your pre-prepared script. It's something we've spoken about already today. It will help you stay in control and help you stay on track. Remember to focus on the issue and not the person. Then remember to state what the issues are and give any evidence that you have. Tell them what the problem, if you're using knowledge of the situation, tell them what the problem is. Give specific examples and refer to dates, documents, work products, or specific interactions that they have had. And then explain the impact of that problem is having on you as an individual, as someone else as an individual, as the team, or as the whole organization. If possible, you should have already spoken to the employee informally about the problem. Surprises can be very hard to handle. If you have been monitoring their behavior or conduct, this should have been agreed with them earlier. So they should know this is coming. If the meeting is just aimed at giving them a reminder about the behavior or conduct, then stick to that. Be clear about what you are doing. Next is ask for an explanation and listen to what they have to say. They may need to let off a little steam. So keep an open mind and don't jump to conclusions. Acknowledge their position and any mitigating circumstances and try and introduce your questions and explore those issues together. So if new evidence emerges, adjourn the meeting. If you feel this is appropriate, remember that you are in control. Use your questioning techniques to avoid diversions or too much repetition. You may have to be firm and keep restating your position. Stay clear of emotive language and don't respond to any manipulative behavior. Next, if that all goes well, you've got to agree the way forward. Ask the employee for proposals to resolve the situation, get them involved in it, discuss the options, and then make a decision. You are in charge. Straight after that, you've got to arrange for a follow-up meeting. This is what we've decided, and this is when we're going to review it. Monitor and feedback on progress and continue to provide support where agreed. The all-important thing is to document an agreement and give them a copy of what you've spoken about. And this should kind of set out, the agreed outcomes, the dates, any standards required, any support or training to be provided by the manager, and of course, any consequences of if that agreement is breached. So that brings us to a close about having difficult conversations. Remember, these ain't easy. That's why I've called this difficult conversations, but they are imperative. You are there to do the right thing. You are there to uphold the values. You don't need those policies and documents to tell you when something's wrong. You know, usually viscerally, you know when something is not right and you know when you need to step in. So when you feel that motion coming up inside you, it's good to have something to refer to. So I hope this episode has been useful to you. If you would like us to delve a little bit deeper, if you'd like us to go down the rabbit hole and pull out some of the resources and try and flesh them out to help you lead your teams better, then be sure to send something in to the Firefighters Podcast at gmail.com. We are here to help distill any of the confusion that's out there in the world and empower you with the knowledge to go out there, be the best version of yourself, especially if you're a leader in your organization. We've got to give ourselves the support. We've got to be looking after each other. We've got to be empowering you with the tools to serve and look after those people the very best. Thanks for coming back to the podcast, and I'll see you next time. The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.